In the vast ocean of Islamic spirituality, a few stars shine so brightly that their light pierces through centuries, untouched by time, unseen by most. These are the women, the Sufi saints, whose hearts became gardens overflowing with divine love, whose lives became living poems of devotion, patience, and selfless surrender. They had no armies, no palaces, no treasures. Yet, through their pure love of Allah and deep reverence for Rasulullah, they conquered the hearts of the righteous and the scholars alike. Some wept through the night in hidden prayer, their eyes never dry from longing. Some walked barefoot across the harsh deserts, whispering his name with every breath. Rabia al-Adawiyya, for instance, carried no possessions, only a burning love for Allah, so fierce that she refused even to ask him for paradise. Fatima al-Nishapuri, living in seclusion, saw visions of light and said, "The light of Muhammad walks before the lovers of Allah." Their love was not built on fear of hellfire, nor desire for reward. It was a love so pure, so consuming, that they sought nothing but to be near Allah. History tried to forget them, yet their stories survived, carried by the winds of devotion written in the hidden books of the saints. Today we open those sacred pages once again. We journey into the lives of 5 extraordinary women, queens not of gold but of spirit. For in their stories lies a secret, the secret of a heart that beats only for Allah and never for the world. Chapter 1. Rabia al-Adawiyya, the flame of divine love. She owned nothing, no gold, no silver, not even a home to call her own. Yet the world still remembers her, not for what she held in her hands, but for what she carried in her heart. Rabia al-Adawiyya, born around 717 CE in the city of Basra, Iraq, was not born into greatness. She was born into poverty, the 4th daughter of a struggling but pious family. Her name, Rabia, meaning 4th, reflected her order among siblings, not her rank in the world. But in the realm of the soul, she would rise higher than kings. Orphaned at a young age, Rabia was soon sold into slavery. Yet even in chains, her heart remained free, bound only to Allah. Her nights were spent in prayer, her days in fasting. And when her master awoke one night to see a radiant light surrounding her as she prayed, he knew this was no ordinary woman. In awe, he set her free. From that moment on, Rabia chose a life of solitude. She lived simply, often alone, often hungry, yet her soul feasted upon remembrance. While others sought paradise or feared hell, Rabia sought only Allah himself. In her own words, "O Allah, if I worship you for fear of hell, burn me in hell. And if I worship you in hope of paradise, exclude me from paradise. But if I worship you for your own sake, do not withhold from me your eternal beauty." These words weren't poetry. They were her reality. She was a pioneer of what would later be known as divine love, Mahabbatullah, a love without condition, without reward, without fear. Many of the scholars and ascetics of her time came to her, not to teach, but to learn. Hassan al-Basri, one of the most respected scholars of his era, once asked Rabia if she hated shaitan. She replied, "My love for Allah has so occupied my heart that I have no time to hate shaitan." In that moment, the world saw the power of her heart, a heart consumed, not by enemies, but by the beloved. Rabia was known to walk the desert barefoot, her feet bleeding, yet her lips praising. She would rise in the night, whispering to her Lord in words that felt like fire wrapped in silk. She said, "I carry a torch in one hand and a bucket of water in the other. With these things, I'm going to set fire to paradise and put out the flames of hell so that travelers to Allah can rip the veils and see the real one. What is the use of worshipping Allah for reward or out of fear. Her devotion was raw, fearless, and transcendent. She wasn't afraid to stand alone because she knew she was never truly alone. In silence, she found her speech. In poverty, she found richness. In surrender, she found power. Rabia never married. She declined many proposals, including those from scholars and saints. When asked why, she said she had no space in her heart for anything except Allah. And when she passed away, it is said the sky wept. Her funeral was attended by some of the greatest men of her time, not because she commanded wealth or ruled empires, but because she conquered hearts with light. In a time when women were rarely remembered, Rabia's light pierced through centuries, not because she sought fame, but because she sought truth. Today, we remember her not just as a woman, but as a fire, a flame that still burns in the hearts of those who seek love without reason, worship without agenda, and surrender without hesitation. She had nothing, yet she had everything, for she had Allah within her soul and heart. Chapter 2. Fatima al-Nishapuri, the mirror of the heart. She was not the shadow of a man, but the reflection of divine light itself. In the golden sands of 9th century Nishapur, beneath the vast Persian skies, lived a woman whose name was carried not by fame, but by fragrance. The fragrance of presence, of purity, of complete surrender to Allah. Fatima al-Nishapuri, known simply as Fatima of Nishapur, was a mystic, a scholar, a guide. She did not walk the earth with the intention to be remembered, and yet those who touched her presence never forgot her. She was the teacher of Sufi scholars, the spiritual companion of men whose names were written in gold in the books of Sufism. But she was made of fire and stillness, like a lamp that never flickers, even in the wind. Historians rarely wrote about her life in chapters, but her silence carved volumes. In a time when women's voices were often unheard, Fatima's presence spoke louder than speech. Born in a region rich with scholarship and spiritual striving, Fatima al-Nishapuri was no stranger to the path of mujahada, the inner struggle of the soul. From a young age, she devoted herself to the remembrance, zikr, of Allah, immersing in the ocean of Tawheed, the oneness of God. Her knowledge of the Quran was vast. Her understanding of hadith was profound, but it was her hal, her inner state, that left the greatest impact. They said, when she sat in a gathering of men, silence would descend, not from fear, but from reverence. Her husband, Ahmad ibn Khadrawai, himself a towering figure in Sufism, once said, "Fatima is not my wife, she is my guide. When I forget the path, I follow her footsteps back to the beloved." Fatima believed that love for Allah was not a matter of the tongue but of the marrow. Her worship was not mechanical, it was burning. In the stillness of the night, her voice would rise, not in demand but in surrender. She once said, "True love is not known by comfort, it is known by annihilation." The lover disappears, and only the beloved remains. This was not poetry. This was the fabric of her life. She lived in the station of fana, the death of the ego, and walked the path of baqa, eternal life in divine presence. People asked her, "Do you not fear hell? Do you not desire paradise?" And she answered with the clarity of one who had seen the real. What is hell to one who sees only him? And what is paradise if not his gaze? These words stunned even the seasoned scholars of her time. Some called her bold, others called her mad, but those who truly knew simply bowed their hearts in awe. Fatima al-Nishapuri was also a weaver, not of cloth, but of hearts. Women came to her not to learn law, but to learn love, love that consumes, that cleanses, that completes. She taught that the veil between the servant and the master is not made of sins, but of self, and that to remove it, one must die before dying. She would say, "He who seeks him with the ego will only find his own reflection, but he who seeks him with emptiness will find light upon light." Despite her knowledge, she lived with simplicity. Despite her influence, she claimed no authority. Despite her station, she showed only humility. She cooked her own food. She fetched her own water. She washed the feet of her students as a sign that knowledge without service is emptiness. And yet, when she walked into a gathering, the hearts would tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. It was as if the souls knew, this is one who walks with Allah. Fatima al-Nishapuri passed away quietly. No great procession, no monumental tomb, but her name, like a sacred breeze, continued to move through the centuries. She did not need books to preserve her memory. Her state became her legacy. In a time when women were told to remain behind veils, Fatima became the mirror. She did not shatter the veil. She polished it until it reflected the nur of the divine. And today, in our hearts, she still whispers, "Be nothing, so that he may be everything." Chapter 3. Aisha al-Bauniyah, the Ocean of Light. In the heart of Damascus, where calligraphy danced on parchment and the sound of Quran echoed through ancient stone, a daughter was born, not to a sultan, but to a lineage of scholars who carried books like treasures. Her name was Aisha al-Bauniyah. Born in circa 1456 CE, she would one day be called the greatest woman mystic of the Arab world. From the earliest days, Aisha walked among libraries the way others walked in gardens. She memorized the Quran as a child, and with her father's guidance, she drank deeply from the wells of hadith, tafsir, and jurisprudence. But it wasn't just law or language that filled her soul. It was something deeper, a yearning, a flame, a whisper from beyond the veil. In a world ruled by men and minarets, Aisha dared to rise, not in rebellion, but in remembrance. She took the path of Sufism, not as an escape from life, but as a return to the source of life. In her writings, we find a heart consumed not by this world, nor even by paradise, but by Allah alone. My heart has become capable of every form, a pasture for gazelles, a cloister for monks. I follow the religion of love wherever its caravans turn. Inspired by Ibn Arabi, quoted in her own terms, Aisha wrote poetry, not to impress courts, but to console her soul. Each verse was a prayer, each stanza a surrender. Her most famous work, al-Muntakhab fi Usul al-Rutab, the principles of spiritual states, laid out the inner path of the Sufi, from repentance to purification to annihilation in divine presence. But she did not merely write about love, she lived it. She wrote, "If you see me turned away from the world, it is not because I despise it. It is because I have tasted a love that makes all other flavors fade." She journeyed to Cairo, debated with scholars, and taught in circles of men, not to challenge authority, but to remind them that divine truth has no gender. And yet, she remained hidden in plain sight, a radiant rose blooming in the shadows of history. Her solitude was not loneliness. It was a sanctuary. Her silence was not absence. It was the sound of her soul bowing before its beloved. There is a story. That one night, as she prayed, her ink ran dry mid-verse. She wept, not because she couldn't write, but because she felt the words had left her. And in that moment, she whispered, "O Allah, if you have closed the door of ink, then open the door of light." Aisha's light did not fade with time. She passed away in 1517 CE, in the same city where she was born, Damascus. But her verses still wander the world like dervishes spinning in the hearts of seekers. She left behind more than books. She left behind a map, a map to divine love drawn not in ink but in surrender. In a time when women's voices were often silenced, Aisha al-Bauniyah sang louder, with silken words and steel resolve. Today her story is not just a biography, it is a bridge between the sacred and the scholarly, between the lover and the beloved, between us and Allah. Let her remind us. Aisha al-Bauniyah, scholar, poet, lover, guide, a woman who did not seek fame, but found immortality in Allah's name. Chapter 4. Al-Kiram, the silent light of Andalusia. She was born into a palace, marble floors, silk curtains, the sound of fountains and poetry in the air. Her name was al-Kiram bint al-Mu'tamid, daughter of the King of Seville, a real princess of Andalusia, not from a fairy tale, but from the golden age of Islamic Spain. But what makes her story unforgettable is not the crown she wore. It's the one she laid down. As a child, al-Kiram was surrounded by scholars, poets, and philosophers. Her father was a poet king, known across the Muslim world for his love of art and beauty. And she too wrote poetry, but hers carried a different weight. Hers was filled with longing, with silence, and with surrender. Marvelously, friends, of what has harvested a burning passion, therefore, not for that. There would be lowered, accompanied by the moon, the night, from the highest heaven to earth. My passion is that I love in such a way that if I broke up, my heart would follow him. Oh, I wish I knew. These lines reflect a heart consumed by love of Allah, transcending the earthly realm. She had everything, yet her heart remained restless. She once wrote, "The gold around my neck feels like a chain. The velvet on my skin is a veil between me and the truth." Even with the world at her feet, she yearned for something greater. As Andalusia began to fall into political chaos, her family was forced into exile. From the palace in Seville, they were sent to the harshness of Morocco, from royalty to captivity. But for al-Kiram, it was not a fall. It was a return to the essence of faith, a stripping away of everything, until only God remained. In exile, she became silent, not out of sadness, but because the noise of the world no longer mattered. She would spend long hours in zikr, remembrance of Allah, quietly, under the open sky. Her former servants now saw her praying alone in the desert wind. Her royal robes were replaced by a simple wool cloak. Her poetry, once written for palaces, now became whispers between her and her Lord. "The throne I sit on now," she once said, "is made of dust, but on it I have found the peace I never knew on gold." She never called herself a scholar. She never sought followers. But her silence became a light, especially for women who thought that faith required loudness, fame, or public praise. In her quietness, there was power. In her seclusion, there was awakening. The world may have forgotten her name in history books, but those who walk the path of spiritual truth, they still remember. They remember a princess who gave up a kingdom for the kingdom of the soul. She never led an army. She never built a mosque. But her life became a bridge, from royalty to humility, from comfort to contentment, from the world to the divine. In her final years, al-Kiram was rarely seen. But those who passed by her small home said there was a glow in her window each night, as if the stars themselves came to listen to her prayers. She passed away in silence, no fanfare, no public mourning. But her legacy lives quietly, like the scent of jasmine after midnight. Al-Kiram, princess, poet, servant of Allah, a woman who turned exile into sanctuary and silence into a message that still speaks to our hearts. Let her story remind us, you don't need a platform to be heard. You don't need riches to be remembered. You only need a heart that chooses Allah over everything else. Chapter 5. Sayyida Nafeesa, the light of Cairo's soul. She was born into the blessed soil of Mecca, where the air carried prayers and the streets whispered stories of her grandfather, Hassan ibn Ali radiallahu anhu, the grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Her name was Sayyida Nafeesa, the lady priceless, and she lived up to it, not through wealth, but through what she gave away. She was offered gold. She gave it to the poor. She was offered titles. She asked for solitude. While others chased power, Sayyida Nafeesa chased something else, the nearness of Allah. As a child, she didn't play with toys. She memorized the Quran. She didn't run through the markets. She sat quietly, listening to the words of hadith. And by 12, she was explaining them to grown men. Knowledge wasn't her ambition. It was her path to surrender. Because in her heart, she had already left the world behind. When she moved to Egypt, the city changed around her. The poor lined up outside her door, and she fed them before she fed herself. The sick came to her, and she prayed through the night until they healed. When the Nile ran dry, they asked her to pray, and it overflowed the next morning. But she never took credit. She only whispered, "It is from Allah, not me." She was married to a noble man, Ishaq, a descendant of the Prophet, peace be upon him, like herself. But she told him plainly, "My nights belong to God, not to you." And he, a man of rare heart, honored her path. Even scholars came to her. Imam al-Shafi'i, one of the greatest minds in Islamic history, sat at her feet. He once said, "I learn more from her silence than from my books." And when his time came, he asked her to lead his funeral prayer. A woman, leading the farewell of a giant, not for fame, but because the purity of her soul could carry the weight of his. They say true saints don't announce their greatness. They walk among us, unnoticed, leaving behind trails of mercy instead of monuments. Sayyida Nafeesa didn't seek to be remembered. She only sought to remember him. Her home was no palace, just a small dim room, where every corner had known her tears, where hunger often visited, but never left with a complaint. She gave so quietly that even angels perhaps paused in awe. The poor wept when they heard she had fallen ill, not because they'd lose a helper, but because they were losing a mother, a light, a woman who held up a city. While carrying her own pain in silence, she passed away quietly, in simple clothes, with no possessions. Even her shroud was stitched from the fabric she used in prayer. And yet, more than 1,200 years later, her grave in Cairo still draws thousands. Not because she ruled, but because she submitted to the seekers, to the broken-hearted, to the women who feel unseen. Her story says, "You are not too small, you are not too much, you are enough, if your heart chooses Allah." And if this story touched your soul, follow us. There are more like her, stories that remind us, the loudest voices in history, sometimes whispered. They lived quietly, but they shook the heavens. Sayyida Nafeesa, a woman who fed the hungry before feeding herself, who healed the sick with whispered prayers under candlelight, whose silence taught scholars more than their libraries could hold. And even when giants fell, they asked for her to carry their final prayers. And then there was Rabia al-Adawiyya, who turned away every offer of the world, who wandered the deserts of Basra with nothing but a torch in one hand and water in the other, saying, "I want to burn the heavens and drown the hellfire, so people may worship Allah for who He is, not for reward or fear." She loved Allah with a purity the world still fails to comprehend. Fatima al-Nishapuri, a mind of brilliance hidden in the shadows, teacher to scholars, healer of hearts, seer of inner realities. When the world valued noise, She offered insight. When others sought to be seen, she chose to see deeper. Through her, wisdom flowed like water from unseen springs. Al-Kiram, the daughter of a king, yet servant to the poor. She walked away from palaces not because they were empty, but because her heart had found something fuller. She stood at the edge of twilight, asking not for thrones, but for truth. And when she spoke, even silence leaned in to listen. And Aisha al-Bauniyah, the poet of the unseen, a master of words who turned ink into prayer. Her soul danced between verses, reminding us that the pen, when wielded in love of Allah, can become a sword of light. Her writings still ripple across centuries, though few know her name. These women, they didn't march with armies. They didn't build empires. They built something far greater. They built hearts, and they didn't ask to be remembered. But here we are, more than 1,000 years later, still whispering their names like prayers carried in the wind. You see, this isn't just history. This is a lantern lit for the seekers, for the tired, the unheard, the unseen. For the women who feel like no one notices, they say, Allah sees you. And here, on Manar al-Madinah, we tell their stories. Stories that history forgot. Stories social media never dared to touch. Stories the world needs now more than ever. So if your heart trembled tonight, if something quiet inside you felt seen, then stay with us. Walk this path with us. There are more stories waiting, in the silence, in the shadows, in the sacred. Subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a journey into forgotten light. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remember. And in that remembrance, we begin to find ourselves again.